This is Jesse Ray with the Growth House Podcast. I am here with Aaron West. Aaron, how are you, my man?
I am doing very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor because we were just talking before we hit record, and we have some mutual friends. And one of them, you were one of his first guests on his podcast. Before I say his name, I was following him for about a year, just every single day diving into this podcast, Action Academy, Mr. Brian Lubin. And you've seen him go from like just starting, getting into GoBundance, which we'll talk about, to now, having a great community, huge podcast. And it's really cool
Amazing
to,
business. Yes.
hear you from that podcast.
Yeah, I think I was a second or third guest on the podcast when he started. So I like to think that I had a pivotal part in helping him grow. It's my ego, but I'll tell myself that.
Well, I'll give you the shout out on that as well. I'm sure Brian will give you some credit too. And then also Diego Corzo, who's a good friend of mine. I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico with him. So that's another one of our, mutual connections. And you've seen Diego grow from what, 2014, you said?
Yeah, I met Diego in 2014. So I have seen I have been watched his whole journey. He is an amazing guy and has done an amazing stuff. So you've surrounded yourself with some really great people.
Amazing people. Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that's actually common that both of them share is they got into GoBundance before they actually qualified. Both of them sent cold DMs to David Osborne, snuck their way into the GoBundance group, and now, officially are in it. So it's really cool just to hear their stories and connect with them. But today's about you, Aaron. So what I want to do is start with, what is Aaron West? What is that lifestyle? What does it look like rental portfolio wise? And then we'll take a step back on, just your background and your story.
Yeah, so I'm in real estate. I have a team in the Central Valley, the West Experience Real Estate Group. We're one of the top teams in all of California. There's 9 agents and then myself. Started it in 2015. Just had worked too hard and decided I was never going to work that hard again. And so I started bringing the team together. The agents that started with me in 2015 are still with me, and I think that's a huge testament to the business and how ethical and honest that we've built the business. And so we've got 14 people now total on the team. I started buying real estate in 2011. I was super broke. My first house that I bought was a duplex for $46,000 in California, if you can believe that. And I had to borrow the money to be able to afford, what was it, an $8,000 or $12,000 down payment and everything. Had to borrow the money to make that happen. And then just learned how to be disciplined with money and just have been buying 1 or 2 houses a year for the past really 10 years. So we've got multifamily, commercial, and then a bunch of single families and duplexes here in the Central Valley.
That's amazing. And then you kind of told a little bit of your background on how you got into real estate, but I guess what was the turning point for you? Was it, coming out of college and then you got into real estate?
No, I was actually in the jewelry industry for about 10 years and retail, and had built a really successful business with them. I was the top salesman for this 14-store chain for about 5 years, and got to the point where I really was just kind of entitled, and felt that there was not a whole lot left for me to do, which in hindsight wasn't necessarily true, but it was true for me at the time. And my father-in-law, this is 2005. My father-in-law had been in real estate since the 80s. And he told me, he said, Aaron, I wouldn't wish real estate on my worst enemy, but you should be in real estate. So I quit my job where I was making $125,000 a year, quit cold turkey with a wife that stayed at home and a 2.5-year-old and 6-month-old, and just dove into real estate.
That's amazing.
I burned the bridges.
And you did burn the bridge. And what do you think of that? Because I think there's 2 different schools of thought. For me, I was like, hey, I want some more security. So I waited until I was actually, net cash flow 6 figures, which basically covered my base salary from my sales job. And then I was like, okay, I got a little bit of security. Now I'm going to go all in. For you, what was your, reason for just deciding to go all in? Or did you have some cash flow before you decided to take that leap into entrepreneurship and real estate?
No, I was probably negative net worth at that time. I just had just decided that it was time, and I was betting on myself. I interviewed with a bunch of the different real estate companies and ended up going with the one that I'm still with now. And I remember him saying something. He said most, and he was talking about his business. He said most people who own real estate companies are realtors who became owners. He said my dad raised me to be a businessman who does real estate. And I remember when he said that to me, that it resonated with me, and I was like, I'm going to be a businessman who does real estate. So really from that moment forward, I started looking for mentors and people who were successful in business so that I could have that mentality of I'm running a business, and it just happens to be real estate. So I'm going to build a really successful business within the real estate world.
Do you think that's a hard transition for some people? Because I've heard this a lot. It's like most people, they only see themselves as an investor once they get into real estate, but you saw yourself first as the business owner.
Yeah, and that was actually there's been probably three really tough transitions in my life where you've really had to remake yourself, and that was one of them, was going from being an employee to actually thinking of myself as a business owner, because it's such a different mindset, such different disciplines, and the opportunities are so different. As soon as you start thinking of yourself as a business owner and you start having conversations with other people who are business owners, then you really start that momentum, and that, as you were talking about with Diego and Brian, that peer group starts to open up, and it's a different quality of people that you're talking to.
Speaking of that, talk to me about the impact for you. Did you have a community that you immediately plugged into, or, a mentor or a coach, or did you just say, hey, I'm going to figure this out on my own?
I immediately got a coach. As soon as I got into real estate, I figured out how I wanted to do business and immediately got a coach. So I've had a coach for my real estate business since 2005, really. I think I quit in June and started real estate, and I got my first coach in September of 2005. But other than that, it really wasn't until 2014 when I got into GoBundance was I really surrounding myself with really successful people and really learned to get pulled in other people's wakes instead of having to figure it out on my own. And I was on the way. I am a classic spender. So I was broke all the time. I worked best with my back against the wall and flames and heat, and like I got to put out fires. And it took me um, a mentor of mine asked me a question. He said, "What's your dad's relationship with money?" And it just hit me really hard, because I was reliving the same financial life that my dad had, which was knows how to make money, didn't really lead an extravagant life, but there's always a place for money to go if you don't value it and put it and have a disciplines with money. And when he said that to me, and that was probably in 2010 or so, was when I really started putting the disciplines in place that have allowed us to build wealth. It's interesting, and this is something I speak to a lot of people about, is just their relationship with money, because it is a relationship with money, and most people have a bad relationship with money. They're either savers or spenders, and I was a spender. Both come from fear. Savers are afraid of being broke. That money is stability to them, so they're afraid of losing money. So once they get it, they put it in their savings account, and it never goes away. And spenders are afraid of the stability that comes from it. They feel like they work better with their backs against the wall, like I did. So it wasn't until I made the commitment that I was going to start having what's the word, stewardship of my money, that I really was able to start putting disciplines in place. And for me, it was, I started an account that I called Not My Money. And I made the commitment that it was a savings account, but in my bank, you know how you can name the different accounts. I named it Not My Money. And I made the commitment that any dollar that went into that account was not mine. That was for Aaron, that was leading the life that I wanted to lead. So that money was all there for me to build wealth. And then as I started putting money in there, and I think with savers, a savings account is just an emergency account. Your tires go bald, you pull it all out. And once I saw that starting to grow and my life wasn't changing, and then I bought that first duplex, then I was like, okay, this discipline works. And that's just, I still have a Not My Money account that I put money into, that I continue to invest even, even to this day. So that was where I was able to separate myself from my relationship with money and treat money for what it is, which is really just a tool to build wealth.
I love that whole not my money concept. I do something similar, except I have to put in a whole separate bank account that's like hard for me to to get out. I think it's like my TD Ameritrade account or something. I just put it in there. But it was funny because one time I had a savings account in the bank, and I didn't call it not my money. I called it like I can't touch this or something like that. And when I went into the bank, they're like, "Is this your money?" And they had to like kind of question and audit me, like, "Why is
No, I
this
just
called
can't
this
touch
account?"
this. I just can't touch
Exactly.
it.
I love that concept. So you co-host a podcast, I believe, called 7 to 8. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not a podcast, it's actually a show. So it's just for the GoBundance community, but we've been doing it for 4 years now. And 7 to 8, what those numbers mean is it's the hunt from going from a 7-figure net worth, which is a millionaire, to an 8-figure net worth, which is someone who has a net worth of at least 10 million. And for most people, they talk about where they are today. So when they interview someone who's super successful, they talk about their life today and the life that they're leading, when really the lessons and the value is during that 6 or 7 year period where they go from the grind to where they actually learn the disciplines to where the momentum of money starts to work for them. And then there's this huge hockey stick. So I think we added it up. We've interviewed, other than we got to interview Richard Branson for the show too on Necker Island, which was a pretty amazing thing. But so other than Richard Branson, we've interviewed about $2.5 billion worth of successful entrepreneurs over the last few years. And it's amazing how all of them, when you strip away the details, all of them have a really, really similar storyline of the lessons that they had to go through to get to the point where the momentum of money was there and the wealth started building on its own. Because until they earned the right to get momentum of money, they had to go through all of these lessons of remaking themselves and learning about relationships and turning failure into success and all these other things that every single one of them has gone through to get to that. So it's been a really interesting show. But the thing that's cool about it too is that it's only live for 48 hours. So it goes out to the GoBundance group of entrepreneurs, and then after 48 hours it just gets pulled. So it's not a podcast that lives in perpetuity, because what we wanted was for these guys to be able to tell their real story. I mean, we've had guys that went to prison. We've had guys that were kidnapped when they were little or molested, or all these things that help shape who they were, that they just don't feel comfortable sharing when they do, a podcast like this. So we make it to where it's private and it's only available for 48 hours so that they can tell their real story, and then pass those lessons on to the guys that are in the middle of that journey, like you or Diego or Brian. You guys are still in the middle of your journey, and there are lessons that as you keep going, you're going to find in hindsight. You're gonna be like, oh yeah, I did have to go through that.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. That's a very interesting concept. What are some of the most common storylines or maybe even characteristics of these people that push through that 7 to get to that 8-figure mark?
I think the first one is, I mean, and it literally is the first one. Everybody thinks when you get to a millionaire, you're like, it's like, oh, I'm a millionaire, I've got $1 million. When the reality is most of the time that $1 million of net worth is tied up into something that you're doing, either real estate or business or whatever it is. So it's you got to make the decision that you're going to build wealth. The second is, which I think is the place where the majority of people fail, is that it's just harder than you think it is. So it's like you get to this $1 million and you're like, I'm a millionaire, and it sucks, man. Nothing has changed and there's still this grind. And because you haven't gotten the mastery that you need to be able to handle and build massive wealth. You and I were talking right before the show started, and it's just, you were talking about getting distracted by a bunch of different things. every single one of these guys, distraction was a time waster in their life. So if they were doing something that they saw themselves doing and they got distracted and started doing something else, those years were just lost years for them, because they may have learned some lessons, but they weren't really going the direction that they wanted to. And almost every single one of them has built massive wealth by being just an inch wide and a mile deep. They took what they were going to do and they just went all in on that and stayed focused, made all of the mistakes, went through that long period of just the grind and the suck and the mistakes. And then you got to learn from your failures. And then your failures, you find out, are the things that actually make you successful. And then there's like this tipping point where they get mastery in whatever it is they're going to do. I think of one of the guys that we interviewed. He was doing mobile home parks. He was working for two guys, and he was cold calling 5 days a week, making 1,000 calls a week to all of these mobile home guys. And after about 6 years, he bought his first one, and then he bought his second one. And then at year 9, he had true mastery of that whole world. And all of a sudden he got put into these rooms with guys that are worth 15 or 20 million dollars, to where he was able to put together a fund and just massively scale on a really short period of time. And it looks like this meteoric rise, but what he had actually done was 8 years of tens of thousands of phone calls to be able to understand and walk through the whole process, to be able to earn the right to have a $25 million net worth.
I was literally about to ask you, like, when does that momentum of wealth start, doing the hockey stick? And I think you answered it. It's when you reach mastery, or is there another answer when it's like, once you have a certain net worth and your money's is compounding, it's working for you, that you also are able to see it?
The answer is yes to both of those, because there is this point where money really starts to work for you, and usually it's about the $6 to $8 million mark. Once you kind of get to that point, then your money's out there in a bunch of different places and it's working for you. So you've got this money that just continually comes in, and it's mastery. It is being so good in that field where you can have a conversation. And the reality is this is it's the same conversation when you're buying something for $200,000 as you are for 2 million. It's just that your skills and perspective are so much bigger and broader, and you have so much more to pull from, that you don't make the mistakes in the big deals anymore that you would have, could have, and did in the little ones. And then you're rewarded for that.
Let's actually stay there, because that's something that I've had to recently kind of realize. Smaller deals and bigger deals is just a couple zeros, right? And so if someone has that mindset, like, oh my gosh, I can never think of something like over $1 million to, like, invest in or do this deal or raise capital for, what would you say to that person who's kind of stuck playing small?
Real talk, you probably haven't earned the right to play big yet. There's a difference between, one of my good friends, Daniel Del Real, says there's a difference between learned knowledge and revealed knowledge. Learned knowledge is what you read in a book, or you go take a course, or revealed knowledge is when you get punched in the mouth and you have to figure out how to fix it. So it is, having revealed knowledge is what gives you the ability to take on those big ones, because the mistakes cost so much more. The little ones are where you get you take that learned knowledge and you turn it into revealed knowledge. So I think that it is, sometimes it's fear, but most of the time, if you surround yourself with people who are on the same journey as you or farther along than you, they will tell you when it's fear. When Daniel, we were at down in Mexico at our house and hanging out one night, and he told me, he goes, Aaron, why is it every time we get into a room where it's like super successful people, you always say, look, I get emotional sometimes even thinking about saying this. He goes, you always say, I don't deserve to be here, or these are big fish and I'm just a little fish in a big pond. And he goes, you deserve to be here. You've earned the right to be in these rooms. And it's those kinds of conversations from people who care about you that say you've already earned the right. So you have the ability to step out of fear. and then you can start taking some of those bigger swings that still feel like small swings because it's just swinging the same bat.
Mm. I think that's the most powerful thing for me personally about getting into masterminds, getting around those circles of people that are way more successful financially than you. And you're looking around and you're like, we're shoulder to shoulder, we're rubbing elbows, we're in close proximity. And you realize they're no different than you. They maybe just been in the game longer. They maybe just, invested in a couple different things or didn't pivot like my problem was last year, hopping all around. They just went deep into one thing. And I think that's just the beauty of and the power of masterminds. Would you say that's one of the
Yeah,
things?
and
For me, it's the belief.
I would challenge you a little bit in that it's not just financial. It's not just being farther along financial for it. And I'll back up just a little bit. I think there's a big difference between being wealthy and being rich. I think wealth is a state of being that has a financial part of it, whereas rich is just a state of account. So when you put yourselves in rooms where people who are farther along the wealth journey than you are, not just financially, but in the whole thing, then you're able to get pulled in their wake. I've been in some masterminds where it was all about money. And honestly, some of the guys were total a-holes, and that was the only thing that was important to them. And for me, and I think for you, and since you're hanging out with Diego and Brian and know so much about GoBundance, it's really finding those places where money gives you a commonality, because money doesn't come by accident. So when you start to build wealth and you get yourself into these rooms where these people have built a certain level of wealth, and along with that have also grown to be better people, now you can start leading a whole life of success, and not just financially, not just being rich financially.
I love that. And it seems like that's a really big aspect of GoBundance, where it's not just about money, just about business. It's that holistic kind of concept that you're talking about. I think it's like go big or grab something.
Grab life
I forget
big.
their motto.
Grab
There
life
we go.
big.
I'm like, I know I'll butcher this.
Yeah, it is.
Grab life big.
And truthfully, it is, you know, Brandon Turner, David Green, all these guys have been in GoBundance forever, because and they will speak to it just like I have. Nothing has changed my life more than being surrounded by a group of successful people who are helping you win your own game. Because the reality is whoever you are listening to this podcast right now, no one cares how much your net worth is. No one cares. It's your game that you're playing. And I liken life to like remember the barrel of monkeys, the plastic monkeys where one's hands up and one hands down. When you surround yourself with the right people and you have real conversations, you figure out that you either are the monkey that has the hand down that can help them up, or you're the monkey that has the hand up with them having the hand down that can help you up. And when you put yourselves in these groups, it just it's all about giving, and it's all about how can I help you win your game. And by default, they're gonna help you win your own game as well, because you want to go fast, go by yourself. You want to go far, find a tribe.
Mm. I love that analogy with the barrel of monkeys. I might use that one.
You can use that. You got to give me credit twice. That's the rule.
I
And
got
then you
you,
can take it
Aaron.
on as
Aaron
your own.
West.
Yes.
Perfect, Aaron. I don't know if you're going to be able to remember when you were just going from 6 to 7, but when you're going from 6 figures to $1 million, become a millionaire. What were some of the things that were holding you back, or what are some things that you see holding people back when they're in that stage?
That's a great question. I think that it is fear is a big part of it. The other part is that I truly believe that we recreate the lives that our parents have given us. Either we rebel against it 100%, or we fall in line because that's what's normal to us. And I think that until you become self-aware of that, you really don't give yourself permission to grow the to be the person who has a net worth of $1 million, because it's a lot of work. It's discipline. I mean, we didn't have furniture in our living room for 3 years because my wife and I said, until we can afford to pay for this separate from our Not My Money account, we're not going to put any furniture in our front room. So you have to come up with the disciplines, the scripture that says he who is faithful in little is faithful in much. The way that you go from 6 to 7 is you're faithful in little, and then those are the exact same disciplines that you use to go from 7 to 8. They're just, the disciplines are there. It's like stability, survival, stability, success, significance. All of those start with the disciplines at survival. I mean, Michael Jordan would take free throw shots. That's how he started his game. It started his practice. They start 3 feet out because that's where the disciplines start, is close to the basket. And then as you get those disciplines, then you start taking the 3 point and half court shots. And I think that's what people miss when they're starting out, is it's those little disciplines, and then understanding that nothing is given, everything is earned. And we live in this society. Garrett Vaynerchuk has this expression. He says people want to get rich quick, but life is long. So everybody's like, I want to be worth $1 million in 3 years. Well, that's not going to happen. You can lose $1 million in 3 years, but the odds of you making it. But if you play the game over a long period of time, you will win in spite of yourself, and you will win no matter what if you put those little disciplines in place.
What are some of those little disciplines that you see that you think people need to work on?
I think the number one, so the best book I've ever read about building wealth is The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you read that. It is. I have. Yeah. Anyway, I have a first edition of that book because it impacted me so much. I have a first edition of the 5 books that have impacted me the most, and that's one of my big 5 is that. And the rule number 1 is 10% of everything you make is yours to keep. So it's easier to keep 10% before you spend anything than 10% after you spend everything. And that's the discipline that the majority of the world we live in right now doesn't put that discipline in place. And if you want to get wealthy, read The Richest Man in Babylon. It's written like in biblical times. It's got Nebuchadnezzar and all the biblical names in it, but the disciplines and the principles there are how you build wealth. And virtually every guy I know that has built wealth, that's one of his favorite books. It was written in the 30s. It was pamphlets first, and then the first book was written in the early 50s. But yeah, it put money away first.
I got to ask, what are the other 4 books?
Okay. The one is from the 1800s. It's called Acres of Diamonds. And it basically is, it's a principle of, the guy has land and he goes sells his land and goes looking for wealth. And then the diamonds are actually on his land. Same as Paul Coelho's The Alchemist. Both The Alchemist is one of my other books. So Acres of Diamonds, The Alchemist, Richest Man in Babylon, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich. And then, those 5: Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Alchemist, Richest Man in Babylon, and Acres of Diamonds.
I love it.
All
What kind
written
of?
in like the 30s. They're all.
I was going to say they're definitely older books.
They're all. One of my mentors says, principles don't change, tactics do. So when you have the principles in place, the tactics can change, and they do change all the time. But if you look at and read every self-help book that there is, you can trace the origins back to those 5 books.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they mean so much to me.
Seems like faith has played a big role in your journey. What kind of impact has faith had? Is this something that you've always kind of had growing up, or something that you've
I'm spiritual, not religious. I grew up very, very religious, and I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not a go to church religious person anymore. But I do believe, and it's interesting you asked that question, because this is going to pull out a tangent of me. The older I get, the more I believe in a lot more stuff. And I'm not so, because the reality is we are all beings of electricity. Our heart beats because of electrical impulses. Our brain is just electrical synapses that go. Our brain is just this huge supercomputer. And so I believe in a lot more of the Eastern medicine stuff. I think that there's value to a lot of that, grounding and even hugging trees. I think that there's a force and energy that we all have. So I would say that I'm a spiritual person, and the discipline that comes from being raised religious has certainly helped me a lot.
Hmm.
I hope that does that answer the question.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right,
I was just
good.
curious because there's a lot of biblical mentions, and so I was curious to see if that was a big part of your life and also your journey. Seems like you pull a lot of that into business, which, like you kind of said, is the principles and values that you
Yeah,
pull from.
and again, the principles in the Bible and what's in there, there's so much value and wisdom to it. So you'd be foolish not to have that be a part of your life.
100%. I want to pivot. I want to talk about kind of what our audience is very similar to Brian's, where they're high income earners, W-2, looking to transition, go from corporate to cash flow. And with that being said, a lot of people make about, 10 to let's say $20,000 a month in their jobs. In today's market, what would you say would be the route if you had to start over and try to replace a corporate job? What route would you go?
Whew. Start a podcast like Brian and get a huge following talking about how he quit
Right?
his job
Hey,
forever.
shout out Lubin. He did it right.
He did it right. Real estate is the fastest way to become a millionaire and to build wealth. I would use the fact that you are a high income earner, buy as much real estate as you can until you get to the point where you have a buffer to be able to quit and find what you really want to do. I would be very careful about, and again, this is my opinion. I'd be very careful about quitting too early, because as a high income earner, it gives you the ability to leverage so much and so many different things to have the market and loans and all those things go to work for you. And then I would make that move. That would be what I would do. Because going from 125,000, and this was 2005, so this was 20 years ago almost. So it was a good, it was probably 200, 225, something like that. To go from that to zero with no safety net is not fun. It was really, really stressful, and a lot of people don't have. I had the skill set of mastery from being in sales for so long to where I was able to make that transition. But if you don't have that, going cold turkey into a whole new industry or field or whatever it is challenging.
In today's market, on that same question, what would the asset class be that you would, start with, or just single family and kind of buy one every year? What would be the strategy?
I think that there's so many more options out right now. Single family is just a really safe way to go. You're big into house hacking. I think if you have the chops to do the house hacking and have a bunch of people in a house, that can be really, really lucrative. I'm not familiar with that world, so I can't really speak to it. But multifamily, you can get into a ton of syndications and those kinds of things. Not so much in this market. And truthfully, I don't know where the opportunity is right now. I don't think the opportunity has really presented itself with rates the way that they've gone up. I'm in a lot of really, really smart circles of people, and they're really all trying to figure out where the opportunity is. I believe it's going to start showing up here really soon as pain finally starts hitting our market and economy, which I think we've been able to ride the wave. So for me, I don't know.
Hmm.
I
I
wish
love
I
the
had something to
transparency.
sell that I could push people in the direction of, but I don't. So I'm just going to say I don't know.
Is you say there's not the opportunity hasn't presented itself because like the ownership to buy a house is high plus the rates are high? Is that why you're waiting for something
Yeah,
to
I
drop and then
think
it kind of
that
presents itself?
if you can afford and it pencils out, there's a lot of places that you can go that it still kind of pencils out. And I think that one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they do start investing in real estate is that you have to be really clear as far as what you want, because there's really two directions that you can invest in real estate. One is appreciation and one is cash flow. If you invest in cash flow, you're typically not going to get appreciation. You're just going to get cash flow. I personally, and this is the way that I would advise people, and it's pretty counterculture and most people don't talk about this. All of my investing, even to this day, is appreciation, because I don't need cash flow. So if you're a high income earner, you buy in places that are going to appreciate because you don't need cash flow. You can always take net worth and turn it into cash flow anytime you want to. But until you need cash flow, you don't need cash flow. So if you're making $300,000 or $400,000 a year, or less, $150,000, it doesn't really matter, and you can buy in a place that's going to appreciate, you have so many more factors working for you. Because if you're only bringing in $300 a month, you're still only going to be bringing in $300 a month, or the equivalent of that, for a long period of time. And I'd rather bet on the market and get appreciation and net worth, because I can tomorrow. To this day, I've never made a dollar on any of my rental properties. I have a couple that we have accounts that we haven't touched, but all my single families, they're all in California. They all basically break even, but I've made millions of dollars in cash, in appreciation, that if I ever decide I need cash flow, I have a business, I'm still working, I love what I do, I make good money. If I ever decide that I do want cash flow, all I have to do is sell those properties and turn them into something that cash flows. So for me, people who are starting out need to focus on appreciation, not cash flow. You don't hear that very much.
No, you don't. That's very interesting. I want you, Aaron, do you mind diving into, you said you can take that net worth and turn it into cash flow. What are ways that you typically do that?
Well, the easiest way would be to take let's just use, you buy a property in San Diego, which is an appreciation area, or pretty much anywhere in California. You buy it for 300,000, you have it for 6 or 8 years, and all of a sudden it's worth 700,000. You've got $400,000 worth of net worth from that one property, that if you turn around and sell that property, you can do a 1031 into a syndication, or you can do a 1031 into another state like Missouri or Arkansas, where you don't get appreciation, but cash flow works really well for you. You buy 3 or 4 or 5 properties, and all of a sudden you're making, $30,000 a year off of that $400,000 with an 8% return. And if you do that enough times, all of a sudden you're making, $400,000 or $500,000 a year. I mean, I could turn my net worth into probably, I could turn it into $1 million worth of cash flow if I chose to at this point, because of the value that we have. But I don't need it, because I live within my means. My business pays for everything. So I'm just going to continue to let the market do the work for me until I need it. And then I'll roll it into something that makes sense for where I am at that time.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned mastery. You also mentioned that you like to do keynotes. What is usually the topic of most of your keynotes these days?
I've got a couple. One is the 7 levels of wealth, and that's from the lessons that we've learned from doing the 728 show, and then building wealth for myself and my family. That I really enjoy talking to people about money and their relationship with money. I think there's very few people that really have the conversation about what your relationship with money looks like, and how do you address it, where did it come from, and then how do you move forward from that. The other place that I love talking about, that is truly one of my core masteries now, is writing goals. The most successful people I know are insanely good at writing goals. And for most people, they write wish lists and results rather than goals. I want to be a better husband, run a marathon. Those are all results that you're trying to achieve. And they don't understand how your brain actually takes in the information that if you do it the right way, it goes to a different place in your brain. Your non-conscious mind starts to go to work on, how can I make this happen for you? Those are the main, my core passions and areas of mastery.
Aaron, I did not prep you for this at all. But with that being said, I would love to dive in a little bit to the goals. And, I like to leave the audience with something tactical. Is there anything that you can mention and talk about with that goals that we can leave the audience with?
Yes. So there's a few things. One is, most people, when they write yearly goals, they actually write weekly or monthly or daily goals. A year is a 12-month period. Your goal should not read date night weekly with my wife. That's a weekly goal. Or read the Bible daily. That's a daily goal. Your goal should have a number attached to it, and we'll just use read the Bible daily. As soon as you write that goal down that way, your brain calls BS on you because it knows it's an unachievable goal. Because you are going to get sick, you are going to miss, you are going to travel and forget your Bible. There are things that just happen in life, and therefore your brain doesn't put any weight to that goal, which is the reason you don't have success. If you're writing your yearly goals, if you write read the Bible 320 times, now your brain has something trackable and tangible, realistic, because you're giving yourself some grace that it can attach itself to and say, I can make this happen. Same thing is true with date night weekly with my wife. That's never going to happen. But if you put 52 date nights, which is one of my goals, is 52 date nights, I can miss a month and go for 3 weeks, 2 date nights a week with my wife and be caught up on my goals. And it's still an achievable goal of 52 date nights. They should always be written as complete sentences. 52 date nights is a complete sentence. Put my phone away at 6 o'clock 36 times is a complete sentence. 150 cold plunges is a complete sentence, but those are goals by which you achieve your goals. So if you want to lose a bunch of weight, and one of mine is to get down to 12% body fat this year. So in my goal sheet, my main one, where I have 2 or 3 goals, one of them is get to 12% body fat. That's actually a result or a wish if I didn't do anything other than that. But if you say, how are you going to make that happen? I have 150 cold plunges, 150 yoga sessions, 150 strength sessions, 75 hikes, track my macros 300 times, drink a gallon of water 200 times, meditate. So I have everything broken down to where it's trackable, to where if I don't achieve that 12% body fat, I can go back and look at what are the activities that I did and then make adjustments. Or if I get to 12% body fat, I can say, okay, now I can set goals on how do I maintain that, and I can switch those numbers up or keep the same numbers.
I've heard a lot of, different ways to do goals. I've never heard of this one specifically. I really like it.
It's most people don't take the time to really understand how the brain works and how writing goals the correct way changes your life, because your brain actually goes to work for you. I do this exercise, and for you in the audience, I'll just ask you this question. How much time do you spend writing goals? And I'll ask you, how much time do you spend writing goals?
Not much. I usually just do it like at the year part and then quarterly and then maybe monthly every month if it's like really
So
important. I need to hit a goal. So not
maybe
much.
5 hours
Maybe.
total. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and gone, oh crap, I need to call that person?
100%. Yeah.
All of us have, right?
Yeah.
Because our brain never turns off. Our non-conscious mind is this supercomputer that is always on and it's always working. So when you spend 4 hours writing your goals, and there's 8,760 hours in a year, that's how many hours there are in a year. If you divide 4 into, or 8,760 into 4, it comes to 0.0004%. So 4/10,000ths of the year are you actually spending telling your brain what you want to achieve. And then people don't understand why they don't achieve their goals. It's because they don't put the intentionality behind it to where their brain says, this is important, and I'm going to go to work to make sure that this happens. One of my favorite quotes is, writing goals is the ability to predict the future. Because if you write goals correctly, you understand how to write them, there's numbers attached to them so that your brain can say, am I achieving this goal, or do I need to make improvements to achieve this goal? All of those things work together to where if you write the goal correctly, the outcome is an inevitability. I know if I do all of those things for my health, I'll get to 12%. It's an inevitability if I do what I say I'm going to do, and I achieve the goals that I set out for. And that's where I think so many people miss, or just have never heard it explained that way. And yet the truly successful people are all just amazing and consummate goal writers.
Hmm. What about consequences or rewards? Do you tie those to your goals as well?
Yeah, I'm not a rewards guy. I'm just like, dude, you said you were going to do it. You did it. Good job. What's the next one? I think that there's, and that leads to another tangent of everybody's personality type affects what kind of goal writer there are. There are people who are free spirits. I'm not a free spirit. I'm pragmatic, right? So for free spirits, they look at goals and they think of those as like chains. They're constrictions for them because they don't understand that the goals, the discipline from goals is actually going to give them so much greater freedom. So until they understand that, they push against goals. And then there's most people fall into one of these three categories, which is create, execute, or finalize as far as your workflow. I'm a creator. I'm a create execute. So I can come up with an idea, get the ball rolling. And then one of the reasons why I teach goal writing is because it forces me to finish and put everything on paper and finalize it and put it on the computer and get everything done. Whereas a lot of people are most people are actually execute finalize. So it's really hard for them to come up with the goals. If someone comes up with the goals, then it's easy for them to do it and finish it. But because that muscle, it's like three different muscles. It's because no one's really exercised that muscle of the create part of it. They struggle with goals and therefore they just don't do them.
Aaron, you have a great way of putting things that can be complicated, just simplifying them and make them very easy to
I,
digest and
I'm like
understand.
I'm not that
You got a
smart, so
gift.
it's just I parrot. I'm a beautiful parrot is all I am. I just take information out and then I simplify it because that's the only way I understand it, and then spit it out.
I love it, man. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but because we got to wrap it up, I want to ask you one thing. So people are going to want to reach out to you. They're going to want to connect from the Growth House family, except we're all go givers. So we want to lead with value. If anyone says, hey, Aaron, can I pick your brain? Whether it's an email, DM, just ignore them. They're not from me. I don't know who those people are. So with that being said, how can we provide Aaron with some kind of value before we ask something from you, whether it's a question, whether it's just to connect, whatever?
That's a really great question, and I appreciate you asking that question. The truth is that, well, I'll say this. I've had so many people pour themselves into me that I'm happy to help however I can. And what I found is that if you're a go giver, it's okay to ask because you're going to be looking for an opportunity to give. And I have no problem asking people because I know that I'm going to find an opportunity to provide value for them in their lives. And it's one of the reasons why we've been able to build my family has been able to build the success that we've had is, I have a friend who's worth $100 million. I will never be able to give him financial advice. It's never going to happen. But he has a young, I'm the oldest of six with five boys, and he has now he's five, but when he was 2 and 3 years old, he had no idea what to do with this kid. And so I was able to provide value, and I'm Uncle Aaron to him now. So there's so many ways to provide value. So you can ask, you can reach out and DM me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to find me. And then I'm happy to help or answer whatever questions I have. And then if you are interested, I do a couple of goal writing. I do a 4-hour Zoom goal writing that is really, really awesome. I'll start doing that towards the end of the year. So if you're interested, you can reach out and I can put you on the list for that. And then, yeah. So you just ask and we'll find a way.
Well, shoot, 4 hour goal writing. Put me on the list for that one.
I actually have the good one is 2 days before one of the GoBundance events or before the big GoBundance events. We take 2 days and it's about 16 hours of really sitting down, writing your goals. But by the end of that 16 hours, you've heard from a ton of people. 4 hours is like the start of writing goals. But I would love to have you on, and I will put you on the list for the goal writing.
Let's go. That's amazing. Do most of your like you mentioned 16 hours, is that typically only for people within GoBundance?
No, the goal writing one, the longer one, we just started doing that, and right now it is just with GoBundance because we're flying everybody. It's in a room, it's 24 people, and we're just locking in, and everybody's sharing and talking about it. The 4-hour one is something that I do for everybody, and that's really more so that people know about the West experience and my team in the Central Valley, so that if they have anybody that they know that's thinking about buying or selling, they would reach out to us.
Well, anyone listening, if you're in the Central Valley, you know who to call. The man, Mr. Aaron West. It's been an honor. I definitely want to stay in touch with you, man. You have such great energy, and I just love hearing everything literally you had to say. I could have dropped the bomb and did a quotable. So there's gonna be lots of clips so we can clip from this one. So, Aaron, I appreciate you being on the Growth House podcast. Our motto is you become who you surround yourself with, and I'm honored to surround myself with you for the last 50 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you, and look forward to getting to know you better as well.
Awesome.